how to navigate a relationship where your partner does not want to grow. It's one of the most common reasons that people give for breaking up. And if you're in this situation right now, I'm going to give you the spiritual perspective on what you can do if you find yourself in that situation. And if you happen to be the partner who's being accused of not wanting to grow and you want to keep your relationship on the rails, I'm going to offer you a helpful suggestion for doing so at the end of this video. So the first thing we want to understand about this idea of spiritual growth is that from the ground level perspective, it may appear as though some people want to grow and some people have no interest in growing. And maybe even some people are doing the opposite of growth. Now, as spiritual people, we like to zoom out and look at everything from the broader 30,000 foot view and not just understand it intellectually, but we want to be able to embody and integrate this perspective in everything that we do. And so when you're observing life from that broader perspective, it starts to become more and more apparent that we're all on a growth trajectory, whether we realize it or not, whether it looks like it or not, whether people understand it and appreciate it or not. And from that broader view, it looks like some of us are taking the active growth route, while others of us are taking the more passive growth route, which means we're not actively choosing to take ourselves out of our comfort zone and into our growth zone. But just from living normal life, inevitably, we get yanked out of our comfort zone for various reasons. Maybe it's because we got sick. Maybe it's because we experienced a loss. Maybe it's because we experienced some other change or demand or pressure that life imposed upon us, and we had to quickly adapt to it. And for those people who opt for the more passive route, life tends to be occasionally very dramatic. There's an emergency and everybody has to drop what they're doing to try to fix the emergency that just happened. And when you reverse engineer how the emergency happened, usually it's because some important fundamental principle was overlooked or ignored and it cascaded into the emergency. And so what you find from taking the more active route towards growth is that you can kind of be more on the front of the wave of change. And that leads to a more adventurous life where you're removing yourself from your comfort zone and you're in your growth zone, and being in the growth zone is very uncomfortable because there's not a lot of predictability and you don't quite know what's going to happen next. So that's where the adventure comes from. It's a choice that you're making, and that's why it's more adventurous, because you're making that choice to move out. But inevitably, we're all moving in the direction of growth. And things like fires and other catastrophic events where people lose a lot, or they lose in some cases everything, will cause them to change and to reflect and to embody some of these spiritual principles that they never saw coming and they never would have ever anticipated. But it can change them from the inside out into someone who is reflective, someone who's very self-aware, and someone who's committed to service. And I've interviewed so many people on my former Light Watkins Show podcast who lost everything, and then it forced them to find their purpose. And if they hadn't been checked out, or if they hadn't gone through all the other things that they went through prior to losing everything, then they would not have had the same level of appreciation for being on a path of service that they ultimately had. And after having all of those hundreds of conversations, it really does give you a greater appreciation for the entirety of the process, and not just the part of the process where people are actively working on growth. So all that to say, we don't want to discount someone's experience when it doesn't look like they're choosing to grow, because again, when you understand and see things from that spiritual perspective, the pattern is we're all moving in the direction of evolution. If you are in a human body and if you're on planet Earth, you're growing, you're evolving, you're experiencing things that are either going to cascade you in the direction of drama or adventure. And there's really no way to opt out of that. There is no neutral path. If you don't have a dramatic situation now and you haven't been choosing growth, then it's going to come at some point. There will be a twist or turn that they experience at some point, and it's going to force them to grow. Secondly, we want to understand, what are we growing towards? When we say they don't want to grow, or that I'm choosing to grow, what are we actually growing towards, and what does that look like? So again, from the spiritual perspective, and I talked about this in a previous episode, we are here to learn how to be better lovers. In other words, to love. Now, what does love mean? It's obviously a very generic term. Some people say, I love my pizza, I love pretzels, I love my partner, I love bicycles, I love taking naps. So we use that one word for all these things. But in general, what it means is I have a greater appreciation for this thing than I have for most other things. That's what we mean when we say we love. Now, from the spiritual perspective, what love truly means is that I see myself in the other. That experience, that person, that thing is a part of me. In other words, there's no separation. So just like how your arm, your leg, your toes, your eyebrows are a part of you, therefore you will never do anything to inflict unnecessary pain onto those different parts that are extended from you. Your family, your kids, your home, under normal circumstances, as a stable person, you wouldn't do anything that inflicts unnecessary pain onto those different expressions of you. When you have someone in your life who you say you love, it's kind of the same thing. You wouldn't want to do anything that inflicts pain upon that dynamic. And so if you are finding yourself inflicting pain upon the dynamic, then technically speaking, you are not experiencing the truest form of love. You're not having a love experience. Maybe it's something else, but it's definitely not the love experience. But that is what we're all growing and evolving to. So to say that you're growing and they're not growing is to insinuate that you are seeing them as an extension of yourself and that they are not seeing you as an extension of themselves. So what I'm getting at with this is someone doesn't have to meditate, to journal, to go to therapy in order for them to see you as an extension of themselves. If they're behaving in a way that indicates that you are as precious to them as their arm and their leg and their earlobe, then that is a genuine love experience, which means they're probably closer to it than someone who thinks that because they don't do all the things that you do, that they're not as aware of a person as you are. When the reality is, if you see them as separate from you because they don't do those things, then you haven't grown as much as you're probably giving yourself credit for. And I'm not saying this to shame you, but at the same time, you see how it feels when someone is insinuating that you're not quite as far along as you think, because maybe you're doing that to the other person and you think you're doing it for good reasons. But if you're truly embodying the spiritual principles of love and seeing the other person as a part of you, you really wouldn't do that. In the same way that if you have kids, you don't really do that. Look, your kids are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And you may look at them and you may even have adoration for their imperfections because it's cute, because it's endearing. And the same thing can go for grown-ups. If you choose to do life with someone and they are not living life in the same way that you're living life, but they're still a good person, they still have a good heart, and they still see you as an extension of themselves, that's a growth experience. That's an expression of love, and that should not be discounted. No, obviously there are people who are abusive. Obviously there are people who are sabotaging. Obviously there are people who are addicted to substances and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who are just living their lives, but maybe they're not interested in the same approach to spirituality that you're interested in. And it's kind of like if somebody who was really close to you had a different religion from you, and every day they talked about how wonderful their religion is and how people who are really smart and who are really spiritual would naturally adopt this particular religion. You can imagine how uncomfortable that would be to hear that all the time if you weren't interested in that other person's religion. Or maybe it's a diet. I used to be vegan for many years. And I remember in the early years of my vegan days, I would try to convert people to exploring the vegan diet with me. And I would talk about all the health studies and how if you weren't vegan, you were going to have a heart attack one day and all this crazy stuff. And I never once converted anybody into becoming a vegan by talking about being a vegan all the time. It wasn't until I stopped talking about it and I just started living it and enjoying it that I saw that, oh, it's not about convincing the other person because it's something that I do. It's about inspiration. That's what grows the love experience. It's inspiration. And so if you want someone to embrace growth in a more active way, which is really what we're saying here, we want to inspire them. Trying to shame someone to grow is definitely not the way to do it. You want to inspire them. And to use the vegan example, one way you can inspire them is you can make food that they enjoy. And then lo and behold, you tell them, hey, this is vegan, by the way. And they go, oh, wow, I didn't know vegan food could taste so good. Hey, if you've been knocking your head against the wall when it comes to daily meditation, falling off the wagon, getting back on, not quite sure if what you're doing is working, don't worry, I got you. For a limited time, I'm giving away my signature 7-day meditation kickstart for free to you, my spiritual perspective listeners. Plus, you'll get a free 2-week all access pass to my entire Happiness Insiders online curriculum of challenges and masterclasses, which will provide you with a crystal clear roadmap for mastering your inner work. You'll also get support directly from me and accountability and a place to ask questions. And you can join me live for a meditation on each of your 2 free weeks. So with zero cost to you, you can get a daily meditation practice that you'll actually enjoy and look forward to doing for the rest of your life. And you'll have me to personally support you and hold you accountable. And after your 7-day meditation kickstart ends, you can start the 108-day meditation challenge and get even more support. And you can take as many other inner work challenges and masterclasses as you can fit into those 2 weeks. We have an unheard of 80% completion rate for our challenges, which is over 20 times higher than your average online course. So if you've been feeling stuck and inconsistent when it comes to your inner work practices, you will not find a better solution anywhere online. Go to thehappinessinsiders.com and let's get your meditation practice up and running today. That's thehappinessinsiders.com, and you can tell that nagging daily stress to kiss your ass. I'll put a link below in the description. There's a restaurant here in Mexico City that I went to a few times, and I ordered like the chicken tacos and I ordered some other beef dish and whatnot. And then after 2 or 3 times, I realized the restaurant was a plant-based restaurant, and the chef would use all these different mushrooms to emulate animal protein. And I was literally shocked by that because I thought I was eating meat. And she's got this thing where she doesn't like saying it's a plant-based restaurant because she doesn't want to just attract people who are looking for plant-based food. She wants to attract people who are looking for good food that happens to be made with healthy ingredients. And so it's one of my favorite restaurants. And the fact that it's plant-based is just an aside for me because I just like great food. That's how you inspire people to adopt some of the practices that you already enjoy. I did a video about meditation the other day, and I said the best way to get people to meditate is not to go home and start lecturing everybody about how wonderful meditation is. The best way to get someone to meditate with you is for you to meditate and to do so as consistently as you can and let them see you making healthy sacrifices for your meditation practice, because that sends a stronger message that you're benefiting from meditation than you trying to convince somebody to meditate and twisting everybody's arm and then shaming them for, quotes, not wanting to grow. If you are truly growing, you are not shaming people to engage in the practices that you're engaging in, because you would understand that that is ineffective from your spiritual perspective experience. So true growth is inspiring. When my friend Will invited me to come running with him years and years ago, and I was not a runner. In fact, I hated running. He said, why don't you come run with me one day? And I said, okay, fine, I'll come running. And we went running, and I could literally only run maybe a couple hundred feet. And then I started cramping up. And he never said, come on, you can do it, push through it. He just walked with me. He said, we'll just walk the rest of the way. And we did that. And then a couple days later, he said, you want to go for another run? And because he didn't push me to run through my cramps, I was like, yeah, sure. That was fun. We got to connect. We got to talk, got to be in nature. So we went running again and we ran a little further, and then I started cramping up. And so this continued happening. A few days will pass and then we go running again. And then cut to 6 months later, we're running literally every morning about 4 or 5 miles a day. And so he took the long approach with me. Instead of shaming me for what I couldn't do or didn't want to do, he celebrated what I was able to do. And as a result, he inspired me to want to become a runner. And then I got the runner's high, and then it was my idea to go running. And literally, I hated running before he invited me to go for that first run. And then I started going by myself. When he would be out of town or for whatever reason couldn't come, I would happily go running on my own, and I became a runner. And so that's how we want to approach growth. We don't want to be telling people you don't want to grow. That's the worst thing we can say if our partner, who we apparently love and we agree to do life with, and maybe we have kids with, and maybe we share a home with, and all the other things, we don't want to be in there shaming them to do anything. Obviously, you trusted this person enough to want to do life with them, So take the long approach. You got your whole life together. Take the long approach and see how you can inspire them. And if you are the person who has been accused of not wanting to grow and you don't want to blow the relationship up, what you can do is you can say something to the effect of, hey, I see you. Because that's really what your partner wants. They want to feel seen and heard and appreciated and valued. And that's what their insistence is really about. It's about you seeing them and appreciating them. And that also is a telltale sign of growth. Because again, maybe you don't want to grow in the way that they want to grow, or that you don't want to use the same methods or tools or approaches that they want to use, but you have to demonstrate that whatever you're doing, whether it's playing video games or going out for poker nights, you want to show that whatever you're doing is allowing you to still hold the space for them to be fully expressed however they're wanting to be expressed. And so just acknowledge that, hey, I love the fact that you meditate. I find it so inspiring. And while it may not be the way that I want to meditate, because I prefer to go riding on my road bike, or I prefer to go walking, or I prefer to listen to podcasts or whatever, that's kind of like my meditation. Your commitment to your practice inspires me to commit to becoming a better person in my own way. And so I love that you do what you do, and I appreciate that. And it makes me love what I do more too. And I think that if we can both continue doing our thing in our own way, then we can grow closer and closer together. Just see them and appreciate them and admire them, and tell them maybe 2 or 3 things you're grateful for about them. And that signals to them that, hey, you're seen, you're appreciated, you're valued. And that's what we all want at the end of the day. You may not be interested in doing the things that they're wanting you to do. That's fine. But you can't ignore it either. If it's someone who you say that you love and care for and appreciate, they want to feel seen. And if you want them to see and appreciate and hold space for you, you have to also model that. You have to go first. Okay? So let everybody have their own timeline to growth, and appreciate where they are right now, and understand that from a spiritual perspective, there is no such thing as not growing. Everyone is growing. Everyone is evolving. Everyone is moving down the current of evolution. And it's just looking a little bit different, or maybe a lot different for certain people, but we're all moving in that direction. We're all on our own timeline. And the most important thing is, do they have a good heart? The most important thing is, are they showing love in their own unique way? And whatever you do, keep embodying that inspiration, because that's what's going to keep people moving in the direction of actively choosing growth, as opposed to allowing it to be a passive choice. What do you think? Does that match with your experience? And if you enjoyed this episode, I want you to check this one out here, which is called The Easy Life Lie. If you want to see the entire playlist of Spiritual Perspective episodes, you can do so right here. Otherwise, thanks so much. We'll see you for the next one.